It's no secret that playtesting is one of the most critical parts of game design. As a designer, you are so deeply involved in the nooks and crannies of your game that you inevitably develop massive blind spots. Is this mechanic intuitive? Is this solution obvious? How do the controls feel? Is my game fun? And so, with October's Steam Next Fest looming on the horizon, I made a plan. I would put together the first 20 or so levels for my game, then playtest them with my partner and friends. Assumedly, I'd then have to make, some tweaks, but that probably wouldn't take too long. Then I could fully flesh out the levels, package it up, and have myself a nice little demo. It was a tight timeline, but I was feeling confident. I started off with 7 levels, just to get a feel for the basic mechanics, then asked my partner to try it out. And, whew.
No. No, please don't. I can't get out of this. I don't want to redo this.
Okay.
So what went wrong, and what did I do to fix it? Well, in today's Grippy Golf Devlog, we're gonna find out. First, let's take a step back and talk about how I designed the initial 7 levels. In Grippy Golf, players can get up to 3 stars on each hole. The first star is simply for completing the level at all, regardless of how many strokes it takes. The second star is for achieving par, except par is always 1. The third and final star is for getting a hole-in-one while also completing all the side objectives. These objectives might be sticking to certain objects, collecting a minimum amount of mass, using fewer than a set number of boosts, and so on. Usually getting 3 stars requires more challenging movements and perhaps a bit of puzzle solving. With that in mind, how do I decide what levels to make and what mechanics they should include? Well, to help me out, I put together a very simple but very helpful design tool. Okay, maybe calling it a tool is a bit excessive, it's literally just a list of every game mechanic in Grippy Golf. Underneath each item, I've written out every detail I could think of for how that mechanic works, and color-coded those details by complexity. So for example, the launch pad. Its most basic function is that it launches the ball in the direction the arrows are pointing. That is fundamental to the mechanic, so it's written in blue, meaning that behavior should be introduced the moment the launch pad itself is introduced. After that, we have the orange details, which are more subtle aspects of the mechanic. So for example, the player only gets 1 boost per turn, but hitting a launch pad will give them a new boost, letting the player chain moves together. Finally, we have details that are probably too difficult or fiddly to be relevant. The fact that the launch pad gives the ball, and anything stuck to it, topspin is neat, but actually taking advantage of that in any meaningful way is probably impossible. But now we have a useful framework for how to introduce the launch pad to the player. First, make a level that uses the basic function of launching the ball. Then, have a level that requires the player to chain together a couple moves. From there, we can have a few more levels that play around with these interactions to get the player used to the mechanic. So that's exactly what I did. The 7 levels I made focused almost entirely on the launch pad. We have launch pads going up, launch pads going down, launch pads chaining together, launch pads facing the wrong way, etc, etc. And when I tested those levels, I was having a great time. Chaining together moves to bounce your way to a hole-in-one is fast and dynamic, and the bonus objectives added interesting twists and shortcuts that felt very satisfying. So, feeling pretty good, I sat my partner down and got her started. And things went wrong pretty much immediately. The first level has this little tutorial thing that tells the player how to boost, and the next platform up is high enough that the player has to use the boost to proceed. I figured this was a pretty elegant way to make sure the player actually learns the mechanic. However, when my partner tried it, this happened.
I can't get out of this.
Clearly, if it takes a player that long just to get off the very first platform of the game, something has gone very wrong. Turns out, the idea that the boost is in the direction the camera is facing is not intuitive at all, so eventually I stopped her and told her how it worked. With that, she was able to reach the end, but she was already pretty deeply frustrated. This frustration got even worse when she started trying to aim the boost at launch pads. Maneuvers that I considered trivial gave her serious trouble, and trying to hit a target while the ball was already moving was almost impossible. That frustration meant that she had no interest in retrying levels to improve her score, which meant that she never even discovered that the side objectives existed. To make matters worse, because these were all prototype levels, I hadn't bothered to add certain features that, turns out, were actually really important. For example, a barrier around the level that stops you from falling into the void if you miss. Oops. In the end, out of the 7 levels that I made, my partner only reached the 3rd, and she had a thoroughly miserable time. Deeply shaken, I thanked her, walked away, and took a shower. But here's the thing. Incredibly painful as this experience was for all involved, it was also incredibly useful, because it pointed out all sorts of flawed assumptions and blind spots that I had developed. And so, once I gathered myself, I set about fixing those mistakes and making a better game. First off, clearly I needed to spend more time and effort teaching the player the fundamentals. For example, I realized that I completely skipped teaching the player how to aim the initial golf swing. In fact, I needed to tell my partner directly that you can aim up and not just side to side. So I made a new first level, where all you need to do to get a hole-in-one is aim up a little bit. To be honest, it kinda kills me to make a level that easy, as if I'll be judged by all the hardcore gamers of the world. But not only is that stupid, having such an easy level actually has a pretty key advantage, in that getting anything less than 3 stars will be surprising. That should then prompt the player to notice the side objectives, and learn about those as well. The next issue is the boost. There are 3 related problems here. First is teaching the player that the boost can be aimed. Second is helping them aim accurately, and third is helping them aim accurately while the ball itself is moving. The primary solution I came up with was to, begrudgingly, add a crosshair to my game. I say begrudgingly because I had tried this before, and I didn't like it. Something about having a crosshair on the screen subtly changes the fundamental feeling of the game, moving it closer to a first-person shooter, and that was against my vision of what the game should be. However, I think this is one of those situations where I just have to suck it up and kill my darlings, because objectively, the crosshair makes it obvious that you can aim, and makes it so much easier to know where you are aiming. I had gotten used to just eyeballing it, but that was clearly too difficult for most players. That brings me to the other glaring issue, difficulty. Surprise, surprise, but I'm actually pretty good at my own game. I honestly thought those opening levels were pretty easy. So aside from going through and making every level much easier, I also came to a resolution. From now on, I have to be able to get 2 stars on every level with a controller and just my left hand. I'm actually pretty bad at aiming with a controller, so that handicap works pretty well to simulate a less experienced player. Hopefully, it's enough. So after making those changes, and a number of others, I was ready to resume playtesting. I decided to give my partner a break and have some of my friends playtest instead, and the results were overwhelmingly better than the first attempt. Of course, it wasn't perfect. For example, remember how I just said that the crosshair makes it obvious that you can aim the boost? Well, not for everyone. One friend didn't realize what the crosshairs meant, while another picked it up right away. Why is that? Well, I'd say it's because the first friend doesn't really play video games, while the second is much more experienced. Okay, so what does that mean, aside from the fact that I need to go and add a line to the tutorial? Well, it means that you also have to keep your target audience in mind when playtesting. When I went back and had my partner try the game again, things were certainly much better, but she still didn't love it. And that's really no surprise. My ideal player is the kind of person that got an ace medal on every level of Neon White. Someone who loves games that are fast and frenetic. Someone insane enough to go back and repeat something over and over in order to win. Someone like me, basically. In contrast, my partner prefers slower, more casual games like Stardew Valley. She hates getting stuck when she's playing, and she's never tried an FPS in her life. Really, I couldn't have made a worse game for her if I tried. And that's okay. While I want Grippy Golf to be accessible to inexperienced players, there's a difference between that and finding the game appealing. I'll probably still ask her to playtest just because, well, we live together and it's super convenient, but I'll have to make sure to keep her preferences and skill level in mind. And when it comes time for me to test out the assist mode, I know who to ask. I often think about video games as a form of communication between developer and player. Communication in general is really hard, so I guess it's no surprise that making a game is hard too. That's why playtesting is so important, to make sure the message gets through. Anyway, that's all for now. Thank you for watching, I hope you had a good time. As always, please, like and subscribe, it really does help me out. And until next time, cheers!